Hello and welcome back to the Ableton 101 course. In this lesson we're going to be going through Ableton's preferences. I know this doesn't sound particularly exciting, but however it is really important to get these preferences correct for your system. Otherwise Ableton will not run properly and you won't be able to do the things that you want to do with it, like recording, adding MIDI hardware and things like that. So first thing you want to go do is you want to go up to your options up here and then you want to head down to preferences. Now automatically you can see all the different tabs you have on the left hand side here, and you can go through a lot of these in your own time to try and find the right settings. What I'm going to focus on is the ones that are really important, and this is in your audio section over here, and that is basically telling where your output of your audio is going and where your input's coming from. Now what I mean by this is if you are outputting to a USB card of some sort, a USB sound card like a Focusrite Scarlett, or maybe you're outputting to a keyboard of some type that has its own inboard sound card, a USB sound card, or maybe you're just outputting to your laptop speakers. If you're just using a laptop and you want to use your headphones, then you'll be outputting to your laptop speakers and your laptop audio card. So first thing you want to do is select your driver type. Now there are two different types. There's ASIO, and then you have your other type, which is your MME DirectX option. Now the difference between the two is that ASIO will stream the audio directly to your external audio device or your internal audio card, whereas the other option will stream it to your computer's operating system first, and your operating system will process the sound and then send it to the end source. So if you want a little bit quicker and faster CPU rates, then I would recommend ASIO, but there is no audio difference between the two. Now you want to then go down and you want to select which one you want. Now I'm running a Focusrite USB Scarlett, so that will be the one I will be selecting. However, if I wanted to go through my computer, I know from my system that my internal sound card is a Realtek ASIO, so I'd go through that one if I wanted to use my sound card in my computer. So we're going to go with Focusrite USB ASIO. So I know now that that is what I'll be outputting and inputting to. If you select the other one though, the MME DirectX, it will take a second there because and now in this setting we can select the input and output device separately for MME DirectX. So if your input is a different sound card, or you're going through, say, you probably wouldn't want to record through a Oculus device, but you can record through, say, your computer. If your computer has a record in or some sort of record in plug into its motherboard, then you would select that and you can output to your sound card separately. However, most of the time you're going to be using your sound card as your input as well, because usually most sound cards have some sort of XLR input of some type, or some sort of inputs that you'll be also using. So usually I try and keep them all in the same, and it's also really easy to troubleshoot if you know that the source of your issues is one particular source opposed to having different sources and inputs going in and out. We can go into hardware setup, and basically that's just going to show us just a little bit of information about the firmware for your USB device. So you can see here, that's my device, nothing special. Down here into the sample rate, these are basically how many samples are being sent in and out of the USB device. We can increase this to a lot higher. However, what this ends up doing is it does slow down your computer because it's sending more data through that USB slot. So it means ultimately that you're using more CPU through Ableton. And if you haven't got a really high spec computer, then this is definitely going to slow down your computer and your CPU. And up here in your top right hand corner, you'll see where it says 2% here. It is basically telling me the CPU load, or how much of the CPU is being used, and obviously I'm not doing anything in Ableton at the moment, so it's very, very low. However, if we were to increase this sample rate and start playing music, that will completely spike up and it will run up to really high numbers and be really slow and difficult to work with. So I try and keep them as low as possible to work with my music so I can hear all the right sounds, but at the same time ensure that my PC can keep up. The latency here is quite important if you are going to be recording. And what this basically means is when you press the spacebar or the play button, this is the amount of time it takes. So we will talk about input first. This is the amount of time it takes for the input signal to get to the computer and for it to be processed. Now I'll speak about output. Output latency is the opposite, where it's when you press the space button, it's the amount of time it takes for that sample to play and for you to actually hear it. We're not obviously going to be including the calculation for sound waves in terms of the sound wave hitting your eardrum. It's just this time it takes for the output to hit the speakers. When we come to drive error compensation, this setting can be used to try and lower the amount of latency. However, I wouldn't touch this so much, but you can adjust that if you're having really difficult problems when you're trying to listen to your recording back while you're recording the song. So if you're monitoring your audio and you're recording something and you're singing and you want to hear yourself singing and you hear that your song or your vocals are coming in delayed and you're hearing yourself back at an odd time, then your latency is going to be high, and you can use drive error compensation to try and lower that latency so that every time that you speak, you can actually hear that back in real time opposed to it coming in half a second late, which is your overall latency is pretty self-explanatory. It's the overall latency of your DAW. So the reason why mine's at 0.29 is because I've got my drive error compensation up and it's compensating for both the input and output latency. Test is pretty self-explanatory. If you're using a new audio system and you want to test it out to make sure it's working, you just set your test tone on and it will start playing a test tone to know that your speakers are working. For those who like to customize their DAW, you can do this through the customization in the look and feel tab. You might notice that my DAW looks a little bit different to yours. That's okay, it's not a different version. All that I've changed is change the theme. So you can change the theme to light, mid-light, which is your basic default setting, mid-dark, dark, and then live 9. Go all the way back to live 9. Personally, I prefer to have it on mid-dark. Not too dark, not too... Did I have it on dark? Who knows? It was on something. I'm only human. So yeah, you can change all of these settings in here. I prefer to have them either at mid-dark or dark. Simply because when you have things on mid-light and light and you're working for long periods of time, you can get eye fatigue and your eyes can start to get a little bit sore from having such a bright screen all the time. So I prefer to have it a little bit darker because my eyes personally naturalize to a more darker setting because I'm using it over long periods of time, and my computer for long periods of time, not just Ableton, but other projects as well that I have on the go, I find having a darker screen helps me and helps my eyesight. So you can do that, or you could just like the look of it better. It's really up to you, and you can change your brightness setting, your color intensity, which really only affect the different colors of your clips in audio tracks, and you can use this to customize Ableton. This next part, link tempo and MIDI, is really important if you're planning on connecting a MIDI controller to your DAW. In order to set it up, all you need to do is connect your MIDI controller to your computer via USB or whatever device you're connecting it to. Make sure that you've installed the firmware for that device into your computer. And I would also recommend having it connected before you start Ableton. So connect it first, make sure you do all the firmware and all of that into your computer first, and then start Ableton separately, because Ableton, what it does at the start when it opens its software up, it scans for any types of MIDI devices that's connected to the computer, and sometimes when it's already open, it doesn't recognize MIDI right away. So it's best to connect your MIDI controller first and then start Ableton. Then what you want to go do is you want to go into input and you want to select your MIDI device. Now I have a small keypad controller, and that's the LPK25. I don't know how to play keyboard professionally. I don't even know how to play as an amateur. So I don't really need a massive keyboard for me to work. It's not how I work myself, but I know that a lot of other people will like to have, really big keyboards up to 48, 61 key keyboards, that's fine. That's totally up to you. And this is the place where you will put that in. So you want to make sure that you've got an input for it. So what this does is it's taking the input from that MIDI controller, and you also want to have its output set as well. So if you're making settings in your DAW, say it's not just a MIDI keyboard, or it's actually a MIDI controller, a MIDI synth, or something like that, you also want to be able to send signal out from your computer to that MIDI device, because a lot of more complicated MIDI controllers, such as the Novotion Launchpad, you can change a lot of the settings in Ableton which affect what's happening on that MIDI control pad. MIDI ports, I wouldn't have to worry about this too much. I've never had to change anything with that. It all depends on what hardware you're using and what's recommended for that hardware to work properly. Again, when it comes to hardware, connecting it to Ableton, always consult the manual. File and folder is important if you have a low amount of memory on your hard drive. You can set temporary folders where all your temporary files are going to be saved. So a lot of the time when you're creating music and you have an audio track that you've recorded, it will go to a temporary folder if you have not saved your project yet. So that's where all that stuff will be saved, and it can become quite big if you start having lots and lots of temporary files. It can eventually become quite large in terms of megabytes and sometimes gigabytes worth of size. So it's important to set a temporary folder that you know you have enough space to hold all of your temporary files. Here in Library, this is where we tell Ableton where the user library is and where to install packs. This comes back to managing how much Ableton is using your data and to ensure that you don't run out of hard disk space for Ableton. Here's where we store our plugins. Most producers have third-party plugins. They don't usually just stick to the Ableton stock standard plugins, because some of the plugins out there are really, really good and do a bit of a better job than Ableton in some regards. Not to say that Ableton plugins are bad, it's just that there are some third-party plugins that can do things that just Ableton can't. So you will probably mount a bit of a collection of plugins over the years as you start to build your skills and you start to get a little bit more creative. You can tell Ableton in this preference folder where you're storing your plugins if you're not storing them in a predetermined path. Here, as you can see, I store my plugins in my old Ableton 9 folder, and I haven't been bothered to change it, so they're all stored there. If you find that your plugins aren't working and you need to know why it's not working, you can always hit rescan, and what Ableton will do is it will rescan the folder in which you have told it has plugins in. It will rescan that folder for plugins, and they will usually pop up on the left hand side here under plugins. If they do not pop up, it means that a few things. Well, either the plugin is not recognized, it's a dodgy plugin, or it's broken in some way. In Record, Warp, and Launch, you're basically making the settings in which Ableton records tracks. So if you're doing live recordings, whether they be vocals, drums, guitar, into Ableton, these are the settings in which it records those sounds in. So when it records your vocal going into Ableton, it will record it in WAV in 24-bit depth, blah-de-blah-de-blah. That's all the settings here that you'll need to know for that. If you ever want to change it to AIFF format, usually just keep it in WAV. It doesn't really make a difference. And then you've also got your warp settings, so when you're warping your different audio clips. Launch is when you launch your track. It's not talking about a space launch. We're talking about when you launch your tracks and how it's triggered. So when you press play every time, that's how they are triggered. And it also talks about quantization, which is basically trying to keep everything in time instead of having things out of time. You won't have to worry about any of these settings too much though. Finally, we have our licenses and maintenance, and that in regards to your updates and whether you need to update Ableton, and also to authorize your copy of Ableton Live 11, in which I hope that you have bought your copy of Ableton Live 11. And you might be sniggering here because you have not bought Ableton Live 11 and you're using a cracked version. That's very naughty of you. However, if you have not cracked Ableton 11 and you've bought it, congratulations. This is where you will authorize your copy of Ableton. If you have not bought Ableton 11, then you should, because it comes with all types of updates and you get all types of plugins and other packs which will help you in your production journey. Plus, the last thing you want to have happen is you work 40, 60 hours on a track and then suddenly your cracked version of Ableton stops working for some unknown reason and you cannot get back to your project, because that is very, very devastating. So, buy Ableton. Even if it's the cheapest version of Ableton, always strive to buy Ableton opposed to cracking Ableton.